Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm here to share with you some monthly recommendations. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group that was created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla from the channel Kayla, and I will leave both of their channels linked below, as well as the link to the Goodreads group so you too can join Monthly Recommendations. Monthly Recommendations is basically just a group where every month we get a fantastic new theme, and we are encouraged to recommend books to you based on that theme. So I have some fantastic books to share with you, and they are all going along with the theme of books around the world. So this prompt was said to include many things. We could talk about books that take place outside the US, books that take place in places we want to go, basically just books that inspire wanderlust, that you want to travel to new places. So that's what I've done. I've collected a bunch of books that either when I was younger made me really want to travel there, or books that I've read that have since made me want to travel back to some of those places I've actually been to. By the way, you guys, I hope you appreciated I found my most wanderlust-tastic shirt. It says all of time and space. Where do you want to start? From Doctor Who, which is such a quote that makes me want to travel. So this was carefully chosen, just so you know. The first book that I want to recommend to you today is Artemis Fowl, and this is a series by Eoin Colfer. This is a middle grade series. There are 8 books in the series overall, and basically the reason I am recommending this book to you, despite the fact that it is fantasy, is that it is still set in our real world, and Artemis goes to a lot of places. Artemis Fowl is a 12-year-old criminal mastermind who is also fascinated with trying to find fairies, and in this first book, he finds one. And it does not go for him the way he thinks it will. But throughout the adventures of Artemis Fowl, he does visit a ton of places, and he is specifically Irish, I believe. So you get to hear described a lot of Ireland, but mainly he just travels all over the place. And every new place he visits when I was younger always inspired me to want to see those places in real life, and it was just a book that really inspired me to want to travel. Most importantly, if you haven't read it yet, this is a really great middle grade series that I completely loved when I was younger, and it's just a ton of fun. So I will say that I'm recommending a few fantasy books here, but there are reasons, namely the fact that I don't read a lot of books that aren't fantasy, that are set in like places that you travel to, personally. Though I've chosen a lot of fantasy books that mix in the real world alongside it. Sorry about that, that's just the kind of books I read. So with that intro, I would next like to recommend to you Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is the first book in a paranormal fantasy trilogy, which is really fantastic, and a good portion of this first book, at the very least, takes place in Prague. As I've said, later on you get a bit more of the fantasy world elements, but so much of this book takes place in Prague, and the lush writing overall of the series just, I've never been super inspired to go to Prague before, but this got me. This book is sort of hard to describe because I think you want to go into it mostly blind, but basically the main elements of the story are a forbidden love, a battle that has been raging on for a very long time, and the general hope for a better and brighter future. I am paraphrasing that from the back of the book because I don't know how to describe this book without giving you plot details, which I don't want to give you plot details for this book. It's a fantastic paranormal series, but the absolutely gorgeous prose and the beautiful descriptions more than anything else made me want to visit Prague. Later on in the series, they also do go to another location in our world, and the description of that area as well is very beautiful to read. Laini Taylor, the way she writes, she could make you want to travel anywhere, basically. Next up, I have a book that heavily inspired me personally to travel when I read it when I was younger, and that is The Thief Lord by Cornelia Funke. I know I talk about Cornelia Funke a lot. It's because I love her so much, and the reason that I bring up this book specifically so often is because it had such an influence on me. Basically, this book follows 2 kids named Prosper and Beau, and they are orphans, and they run away from their mean family that is taking care of them because they want to travel to Venice, which is a place that their mother always told them about. This book takes place entirely in Venice, and I read it so many times when I was younger, all with the idea in my head that someday, because I read this book, I had to visit Venice. And just a few months ago, in December, I got to, and being able to match this book up with seeing Venice in person was one of the most, like, magical experiences of my life. To be honest with you, 100% honest with you, it was a magical experience because this is such a magical book. I reread this book the week before traveling to Venice so I would remember all of the elements, and it made it so incredible to be there, and all of those years of being inspired to travel to Venice all culminated in such a beautiful moment for me. So if you're looking for a book that is set in Italy and is going to inspire you to travel, then I highly recommend this middle grade fantasy as well. Next up, I want to recommend to you a book that I read while I was traveling, which was super great, and that is Just One Day by Gayle Forman. Just One Day is a YA contemporary that follows a girl who has just graduated high school. And following that graduation, she goes on a 3-week vacation all over Europe. And just as this vacation is coming to a close, she happens to meet a guy and she runs into him twice. It's super random and he convinces her to go and spend just one day with him in Paris. There is a lot more to the story than that, which I didn't know going into reading it. I thought this was going to be just like a sweet, happy romance, but what it wound up being was a journey of self-exploration for the main character and learning who she was and learning about trust and learning to step away from her mother's expectations for herself. But what was great about this book is that so much of it was set against the backdrop of travel and going through Europe, and that made it such a beautiful experience to read about. But overall, she just goes on this amazing European journey, and the way that all of these places are described made me want to travel all over again because my time living abroad was coming to an end, and that book was like, no, I need to travel more, I need to go more places. So if you were looking for a YA contemporary that's going to make you want to travel, I highly encourage that you read this one. And along those lines, I have another YA contemporary for you here, and that is 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. This is another book that I read prior to doing any traveling, but was one of the ones that heavily inspired me. It follows a girl named Ginny, and just after her aunt dies, she suddenly receives a letter from this aunt telling her that she's going to have to drop everything, take a plane to London, and begin a journey. Ginny decides to go along with this as a way to reconnect to her aunt, who she loved very, very deeply, and so she does wind up going on a journey, and at each step she has to try to find one of these letters that her aunt has left behind that leads her from London, and to Scotland, and to Greece, and to Italy, and so many more places. This does have a lot of elements of Just One Day, but overall I think that this one is lighter. While Ginny is going through a lot of stuff, clearly with the fact that her aunt has passed away and she's learning so much about her after her death, there is this element of happiness going throughout because she's learning so much about this aunt that she doesn't have in her life anymore. Plus, there is a super cute romance throughout. I got to read this book again while I was traveling, and it made it that much more fun, and it made it definitely live up to what I had built it up to in my head prior to being able to travel to any of these places, so I highly recommend that you read this one as well. The next book that I want to recommend to you is one that I just barely finished, and that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. So this is, again, a fantasy book, and technically there are no elements in our world at all, but this book basically takes place in a world where there are 4 parallel Londons. There is Grey London, which has next to no magic and is pretty similar to our own. There is Red London, which is thriving and full of magic. There is White London, which has been basically drained and magic has become kind of a vicious thing. And then there is Black London, which has been closed off for so long that it's basically become the part of stories. And our main character, Kel, is one of only 2 people who has the ability to cross between these different Londons. Now, like I said, none of this takes place in our own London. However, just the experience of reading about all of these different types of Londons filled me with a need to go and visit London again. Even with how different each one was, I just kept feeling that beating in my chest that made me want to go and travel and visit again. The book begins with a section called The Traveler, and that is Kel, and just all the traveling, it made me want to travel. That's what it comes down to. This book made me want to go back to London, it made me want to travel, it made me want to go places, and it's fantastic. And now we've gotten to the end. Usually with these monthly recommendations, I recommend to you about 7 books, but I liked the 6 I chose, so I decided to tack on a 7th and that's going to be a book I haven't read yet, and that is Amy and Roger's Epic Detour by Morgan Matson. One of Morgan Matson's other books that I recently read, Since You've Been Gone, does feature a travel element, but I didn't love that book as much, and I didn't really want to recommend it for this, but I've heard that this book is definitely just going to make me want to travel. This is all about a road trip, as you can tell from the title and the cover. This book is also supposed to be dealing with grief due to the fact that Amy has lost her father in the past year, and ever since he died, she hasn't been behind the wheel of a car. So she has to do this road trip to get her car from Connecticut to California, and it just sounds really interesting. It sounds like it's going to be about a road trip, but it's also going to be deeper than that, and I've just heard so often that this book inspires people to want to take a road trip, which I love. I grew up taking road trips, so I'm very excited to read this book, and I don't usually recommend books I haven't read before, but I felt like this one fit the theme so well. How could I not mention it? Okay guys, there you go. Those are my monthly recommendations for books around the world, general wanderlust books. I hope that I have inspired you to pick up some of these books and that these books in return inspire you to do some traveling, because that is how they affected me. If you have read a book that you think really fits this theme, please let me know what that is in the comments down below. I would love to hear your recommendations. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!